Reimagining Success, episode 188. You're listening to Reimagining Success, the podcast where we help you reimagine your future, designing a life and career beyond the 9 to 5 that allows you the freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment that you've been dreaming of. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg. Now, let's get started on those dreams. Okay, welcome everybody back for another Escaping the 9 to 5 interview. And I'm here with Ron Voller, who comes to us all the way from New York and just ran a half marathon last weekend in Brooklyn, which sounds incredible, but is apparently just one small part of the exercise challenges he set for himself. But we're here today to talk about his career evolution. And so why don't we dive straight in, Ron? If you could tell us what you were doing in your previous life, I suppose, how you started your career, and then what you're doing today.
Sure. Thanks, Anna. I was working after I moved to New York. Very shortly after I moved here, I got a job in the theater and event business. I was working as a high steel rigger and a scenic artist, scenic installation expert, et cetera, et cetera. And I did that for several years, but all the while was working on these other things that I wanted to do. Around 2005, I started my own scenic business. And so I was working the whole time in the background, either hanging motor points 12 stories in the air, or on the ground fitting New York Fashion Week with their sets and things of that nature. And I dovetailed that into this scenic business, and we did that for a while. And we started doing more theater and more television set pieces, dance and things of that nature. And then I later, 2008 or 9, started into the front office of the production event world, wherein I started working with the client-facing side of the business. So I really kind of progressed from the background into the foreground of the production event business, and that started really started in 2000, around 2011. I started really 2010, 2011. I started really getting into that, and I did that for 5 years or so, at which point my first book came out. I finished it finally. And then I started to progress on my way out of that business and into the writing world.
And it sounds like there were already some twists and turns along the way, as you said, from behind the scenes to the front. And then you teased just a little bit there with, as you said, you wrote your first book, and you said that you were working on a number of different projects alongside that work. So if we go back to the beginning again, was your passion always on the event side and the scenery and so on? And what was going on there, as you said, behind the scenes for you? What were those side businesses, side ideas, projects that you were working on?
My passion has always been music and literature. I went to school at the University of Denver. I studied both music and literature, double majored in those two. Out of college, I was a paid musician for 10 years, and I had been really involved in that side of things. And playing with a Denver-based rock musician in several different, the way the rock world goes, where you're constantly re-enveloping yourself with different musicians and calling yourself new names, blah, blah, blah. And so by the time I got to New York, I had decided to get out of that. I had had enough of that little merry-go-round, and I decided, well, let me try the writing, because I really I don't want to let that pass. It was kind of like an equal passion of mine. So I started in and got into the process of that. And that's what I was doing. Getting into the theater business allowed me to take jobs that were short focused. So I could get in, make some money, and then have a period of time when I had, money and time where I could really focus on the writing. And so that's what I started doing. and trying to figure out what I was about as a writer. Because I'm starting from scratch again, the way I had as a musician. So it was it wasn't any more arduous than any other kind of. It's not really a reinvention, but an evolution. You work at it and try to figure out where your voice is, and slowly but surely you figure out, okay, I'm not any good at that. So let's try this genre. And I eventually landed on children's fiction. I was going to start writing that. And that's what I published my first book, and a children's book that I wrote and illustrated in 2005. So that's kind of the background information there. The other thing was supporting what I was doing. And I had grown up in the theater world, at least in part in the theater world, all through high school and college. I was connected to it. I worked at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts for a number of years. And so it was always attached to that. So it never really kind of left the environment that I felt most comfortable in. So it was natural for me to fit into that in New York. It just, again, evolved in a different way.
Yeah, it certainly sounds very glamorous with Fashion Week and theatre and Broadway and everything. We talked a little bit before we went online that we have a few common interests. Musicals and theatre is one of mine as well. So, it sounds amazing. And you mentioned there, of course, money and time being pretty important pieces of the puzzle as well. Looking back over these different choices you've made, do you think you value different things at different times? Obviously, coming out of college, did you have different priorities? And then, more recently now, has your perspective shifted on what's important to you? I
think that would get into some territory that we don't have time for, but I will just say that I learned through the process, through the people that I met in the collegiate world, for sure. And then post-collegiate, the friends that I maintained and the new friends that I made along my journey, I started to learn very slowly what my actual values were and to pay attention to them. I wasn't connected to that coming out of my childhood. And so they were there. They were always there right in front of my nose. It's a funny thing, but I wasn't connected to them in a way that propelled me to them. And so I was kind of more or less following my bliss, and which is a nice natural state. But, knowing who you are and what is super important to you is vital for making, the moves that you need to make to get you moving in a certain direction. So by the time I had moved to New York, I was well on my way to that finally, but not, my trajectory is a little bit longer than I think a lot of people, who discover that kind of in high school, or certainly in the collegiate world.
It's interesting that you say that, no, because that really lands with me. And I'm so glad you talk about your values, because it's something I've come late to. Definitely. I think in the past, maybe if someone had said values, I would have thought sort of religious principles and so on. And through my coaching work and personal development and understanding what's important to me, that's one of the key things as I left my own corporate job, discovering, and maybe it's obvious, but that I really valued autonomy and freedom and these kinds of things, having been in the school system and the 9 to 5, that was really enlightening for me. And I think sometimes we're so obsessed with, and in fact, even for me, I was looking at what's the company I want to work in and what's the exact job title and description. We forget the bigger picture, the guiding framework in a way that's so much more important. There are so many jobs I could have that could fit into that. So far more powerful to look at those values. And I don't know if you're being hard on yourself, because I think that's very hard to work that out in high school at such a young age. I admire kids who now are much younger than me, who are more clear on those things than I ever was. But certainly I think it takes a lot of us a lot of time to realize what's important and to get clear on those values and how those values can then guide our decisions.
Yeah, I suppose that's correct. I didn't mean to put it all into one focus. I know a lot of people who say to me, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
When you grow up, exactly.
Constant thing. So there is a lot of that for sure. I did know what I wanted. I knew what I loved. I knew what I was curious about. those things have always, like I said, they've always been kind of with me. But the things that I specifically kind of value as an artist, I mean, we all have similar things. I think a lot of us have similar things that we tend to value, whether it's, travel, family, friends, that kind of stuff. But as an artist, as in my world, what are my, and kind of understanding that sooner than later is a good way to kind of keep yourself focused. And you're right. I think that it probably in terms of your evolution through life, you're probably getting to those things a little bit later on. You're maybe not quite as in touch with that when you're in teen years. So.
And in terms of, obviously, you initially started a business and another business, and now you've become a writer as well. You mentioned the difficulty, at least the process of discovering what you're not so good at, what you are good at. What have been some of the other challenges or difficulties in making the transition for you? What's been difficult to lean into this new direction?
New York City is not a cheap place to live. So roof over the head is obviously a thing, which, has been the hardest part of the transition is, as you're gaining momentum, what things are you maintaining, a hold on, that's part of the reason why I'm still in production, because, I haven't done any for, 3 years, but, and everything's fine. But, you maintain your grip on those things so that you're attached to the world enough that if something, goes wrong or whatever, you do what you need to do. And I love the environment, especially in the field production world, maintaining storylines during filming productions and things. Kind of really interesting work. I have a lot of ideas. So trying to figure out what the pipeline looks like in terms of priorities is a thing. Obviously, some of the work I'm in is fiction-based, especially with the children's world. Those tend to be, well, it depends. If you're writing a novel, then I spend some time developing what that environment looks like in my mind, what it looks like, and get that down, what the characters are like, who they are, at least a beginning of that, try to develop some of that. But generally speaking, even that approach doesn't take quite as long as a long research project. I mean, I spent 15 years developing the research that I needed to write these first 2 books. Okay. Wow. And so it can take a very long time, depending on how marginalized your subject matter is. So there's these countervailing kind of winds that you just sort of have to navigate, That's probably the hardest part, is just figuring out what kind of makes most sense in terms of, okay, here's where we are. What does this look like a year down the road? What do you need to be, what do I want to be doing? How far do I want to take this before I'm moving on to the next project? And what can I be doing about that next project or the next projects in the interim? So that's kind of, probably the hardest part of it. Adding new environments, the podcasting environment is something I've been taking on lately, and I'm planning to launch my own podcast next month, as a matter of fact. So
congratulations. And what's the podcast about?
It's going to center around these 2 books. It's going to center around Big Bang cosmology, its origins. And the plan is, what I want to do, and a lot of people have tried to do this, but what I really want to do, my goal is to really unpack the physics in a way that the layperson can walk away and go, okay, I understand how we got here. And if you really kind of work through the entire history, it's fairly obvious how we came to the realizations we've come to. And not everybody agrees with it, but most of physics does. So at least for now.
You've got a listener in me already. I'll definitely look out for that. I was listening to, Stephen Hawking. Obviously, of course, no podcast in those days, but when I was little, I had it on VHS cassette. He was explaining the Big Bang and everything. So it's a lifelong passion for me. So that's an amazing, amazing sort of passion project, but also then connected to your writing. It's interesting, as you say, because it's such creative endeavor, but it sounds like you're bringing a lot of discipline to really extensive research. Obviously, it's a complicated topic area that you've chosen for yourself as well, but also the discipline, road mapping, planning ahead, working backwards. So it's not just, I'm going to write in this beautiful desk and that view of the sea. And, it sounds dreamy, doesn't it? And as you said, the money too. Have you found that the pressure to earn money with it has kind of ruined the creativity and artistry of it? Or do you feel, because obviously you said you have your production and it's going well for you, do you feel that you can just relax and enjoy it and do your thing?
I've mostly been enjoying it, but you pay attention. I'm not Doris Kearns Goodwin. I'm not Walter Isaacson. So, I need to pay a little attention to how it's going. The ball is rolling and things are moving well. So you just, you keep, like I said, just trying to add the layers to those early successes. But I'm not super concerned about it either. I think things are going rather well.
And what are you most enjoying about it? What is going well? What's the the best part of life at the moment?
Writing is such a bizarre mix of isolation. Just the cratering of that isolation presents to you after a while, and the glory of new discovery, being curious and having that curiosity rewarded from time to time with just stunning realizations. Getting the book done and getting out there and actually talking to people about it is super exciting. It just makes the whole experience worth doing. I joke with my friends that writing is kind of especially research writing, but writing is a kind of this beautiful, open, glorious, shining prison. and your goal is there's a way out. You can there's a way out. But you're all by yourself, and you have to find your own way to navigate the experiences therein and get out. And once you do, though, it just looking back, it's really phenomenal. And the conversations you have with people and the people you meet along the way. I mean, the people that I know in the cosmology world are just brilliant, and the things you learn from them and try to apply to what you're doing and the lessons you learn. Every profession has that, that idea of being the teacher and being the learner. That's easily the greatest part, though. Getting the thing done and seeing it published is just, that's a pretty bulletproof experience. It's hard to beat.
There's some very evocative imagery, which I would expect from a writer, but it's interesting that you describe as that prison, and it's sort of the seasons almost of the project, I guess. As you say, there's the isolation period, but then there is the coming out and talking to people. And I'm sure you'll find the podcast as well, although it's in a way isolating too. If you're sitting sort of in the booth recording, obviously people are listening to you, and you'll maybe bring on people that you're talking to and so on. So hopefully that will open up. But I think also a lot of us, and I say us because I attempt to write as well, we want to, certainly historically, I wanted to be a best-selling author with the pile of books. And as I said, I want to sit here with the ocean view writing. And yet we don't actually want to do the work and write. I find that that's that kind of, I guess, writer's block is the label we use, but you just fill your time. Those of us who aren't prolific writers, at least, who haven't reached that kind of discipline, we can fill our weeks with no writing, in fact. And we long for this amazing moment that you just described beautifully, and it sounds bulletproof, yes, but you actually have to write to get there, right? So I suppose my question is, selfishly, again, do you have any tips for, do you literally block your calendar? Do you, how do you set yourself for success to make sure that you're actually doing the stuff that's going to get you the opportunity to present your book to the world?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, isn't it? Because I mean, the books you read, the things you read, very often tell you need to write every day and all this stuff, and you need to write what you know. And okay, I tend not to agree with either of those things. Although, to an extent, I would say if you're just starting out, writing every day is a good thing, and you don't need to be super disciplined about what you're writing. I mean, other than if you think you have if you think you want to write in fiction, for instance, and you're a crime mystery lover or whatever, and you think you want to get into that, then look around your environment. When people ask me this, where do you get your story ideas? Well, they're everywhere. I mean, if you're attuned to the discovery part of, idea generation, then you just everywhere you look, you might find a seed of something that gets planted for an idea, and you start illustrating it. Curiosity is, to my mind anyway, more important than what you know. If you're curious about a topic or a theme for a book, that's going to propel you far better than just simply writing what you know. Very often we're bored by what we know. If it's not something really scintillating. So I think being curious about the world and being curious about, the subjects that are important to you is the way forward. So learning, writing a lot does one thing overall. I mentioned it at the top of this, and that is it kind of, if you're writing and you're presenting the stuff that you're writing to people and whose idea, who are going to be level with you and be honest, not just tell you everything is lovely and rosy. If you have that kind of audience, you're going to figure out, you see when the lights go on. Somebody reads something and goes, "What? Wow, you can't do that," or that was really good. Okay, I didn't like that last thing you did. The theater thing is not you, but this is pretty good. So you start to get a sense of what you're good at and what you feel good in and that sort of thing. The rest is just persistence. That is the killer, isn't it? Be passionate about what you want to write about and be persistent, because you do it. It can be really a slog, and some people really, really suffer some writers really suffer during the writing process. So
yeah, and that's sort of the starving and struggling artist image that we have in mind, I suppose, which is not necessarily reality, but it's inherited.
Other, I think Sorkin talks about writing in ways that if you listen to him talk, you would go, "You're just ungrateful," But he really, I think he has trouble. The process is laborious, at least at times.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that he has, like I do, moments where you just go, "Oh my God, that was the coolest thing." And then you have days where I've had days where I've written, 5,000 or 6,000 words and thought, you know what, this is going to be the greatest book ever created on science. And go back the next day and read what I wrote and just go, what were you thinking? So.
I think I don't know if you're familiar with is it Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art? He writes a lot about that. I believe I've read it some years ago, and I often recommend it to clients. But I think the comparison he gave was, if you're a lorry driver, like you're driving a big truck, you're not like one day you wake up, it's like, "Oh, I have driving block, I can't drive today." That persistence of, look, you just need to like sit down and write. And the other thing, if you're familiar with Angela Duckworth, she's written the book Grit. She did a lot of research at UPenn on grit, which she calls, and it's those two things you said. In fact, it's the passion and the clarity of the big purpose, and then it is the persistence of doing the work and being resilient and so on. So I think those are so cool, aren't they, to know why you're doing it and what you're curious about, what you're excited about, but then also you do need to do the work, unfortunately. Or fortunately, that's part of the joy though, isn't it, as well, because you enjoy it and then you get to reap the benefits once you've finished.
Absolutely. I love that there's the war of art and the art of war.
Yes.
But we all have bad days at the office. I mean, no one should be looking at writers or musicians and just look at the cavalcade of celebrities filing through, psychiatric wards to know that it's not all that roses. And I mean, even my experience in the theater, that was a very dirty fingernail kind of experience. It's not as glamorous.
Well, that's it. I think anything that's unfamiliar, it sounds so, we romanticize it, we idolize it, but actually once you work in the kitchen, you see how they make the food, and suddenly it's not so mysterious and attractive anymore. Yeah, but it's a good reminder in a way. It kind of breaks the dream, but also makes it more achievable in a way, I guess.
It's solid, it's part of life
real,
on Earth. We've I think I'm not going back. I love what I do at the end of the day, but it's you have to work at it. You really have to work at it. It doesn't come so naturally to most of us. There are a few people who I think tend to have maybe a little bit easier time in a genre that really they can just push stuff out. And I marvel at how prolific some writers are. Just really, really good storytellers. Really, really get it. Probably as good at telling a story as they are writing it, which is they're not the same thing. It's mutually exclusive. For most of us. But I think for most writers, probably all writers to one extent or another, it's a job. I mean, you and you do have bad days, and certainly have bad days at the office, and other days where you just think it's the greatest thing I could have ever chosen. How did I get so lucky?
And speaking of job, I talk about escaping the 9 to 5, and initially I did, I guess, mean the job itself, but more and more I think of escaping the structure of working, obviously Monday to Friday in an office and so on. So I'm curious, what does that look like for you? Are you quite flexible with where you work? Is it your energy? I know you do a lot of things other than working as well. So what does that kind of more flexible routine look like for you?
Yeah, right. You did mention that earlier. Sorry. Yeah, I regiment my time for sure.
Okay.
During the writing process and during the research process. But now research is a little bit different because some of the research you're doing online. Some of the research is interviewing people. Some of the research is going and spending time at libraries or institutions, and having more hands-on approach. But in that case, the scenery is changing, and you're dealing with other people's schedule. But just in terms of the writing, I very definitely have a regimented schedule. I get up, I do a certain number of things. I'm athletic by nature, so I schedule my time so that I know that I have. It just depends on what end of the process I'm at, but 2 to 6 hours of proper writing time.
Okay.
And that can change based on what I'm working on. The longer time periods, you're usually the research end of it. So you're jotting things down. It just takes more time. Yeah. But you definitely need to be regimented. That's the persistence part of it. That's when you get up and you're like, oh man, I just don't feel like it today. And then you go. Yeah. Just a little bit. Yeah. Just, sneak something in, because it's a long process. And once you start talking yourself out of a daily routine, you really can, you can really fall off.
Well, speaking of athleticism, I think a rule within sort of fitness that I always see on Instagram is, never skip a Monday kind of thing. So it's, at least, but you need to start the week. If you Monday morning go, oh, I'm too tired, then easily that becomes Tuesday, Wednesday, and suddenly the week's gone. So there's another book, I think it's a Brian Tracy who's written Eat the Frog, who says you need to do the most disgusting, horrible, challenging thing first thing in the morning, and I think first thing in the week too, because then if you do nothing else, at least you've eaten the frog, right? So I think if it is something important to you, like writing, whatever, that needs to come first, and then everything else kind of fits in around it, doesn't it? So it's that kind of do it first. If it really is a priority for you, then prioritize it, make it a priority.
I would say so, if it fits into your natural process. But it sounds like you read a lot, and that's another thing I think some people get into the writing world or whatever world it is they want to get into, and they read about it and they, take courses and they, I did study literature in college, but I've never been, I don't really read the books about how to be a writer. I'm not wired that way. And if you are, then you should, by all means partake. But the bottom line is, persistence is about routine. It's about discipline, all those things that we as adults, I don't want to grow up either, but I force myself into it because, it's these projects are, they take a while to get where you really need them. So, and you should, if in the writing business, I know that this show isn't necessarily about writing, but if you are thinking about getting into the writing business, make sure you have a good community around you, a network around you, people that you trust, because that editing process, especially early on in the game, is vital. It really can help propel you.
The reading books is funny because I am wired that way, and that's always my go-to is to read. These are not necessarily books about writing. It's also about business and time management, whatever. But I agree with you. And even for me, or especially for me, maybe, and my kind of type, it's really important that we don't use that as an excuse, because I think, as you mentioned, being comfortable in that world. And if we allow ourselves just to, I'm going to do a course on writing, I'm going to read a book on writing, that's great. But at some point you do actually need to write as well. And sometimes we can use that almost like procrastination. So there are, another book, it reminds me now because it's been some time, but Stephen King wrote a book on writing, which is also really about the discipline of how he wrote and so on. But again, it's all very well that I read the book. If I don't then just sit down and write something myself, I'm never going to actually get anywhere. So it's a good, little prod to remind me and other people, whether it's writing or something else, right? Doing another course, reading another book is not actually going to get you to where you want to be. It's interesting, it can be useful, but ultimately you have to sit down and do the work yourself.
Agree. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other useful tidbits in those books. I remember reading a book by Paul McCartney on songwriting, and you were learning about the experiences that he had in that world also, and how different people were wired differently and better or worse prepared for moments, opportunities, and that sort of thing. So you can really glean other things from these books that aren't just about, the 10 steps to becoming a great writer kind of stuff, really just get involved with something you're passionate about. If you want to be a writer, and stick to it, and you'll probably do pretty well.
Yeah. And I guess wrapping up, but also you mentioned the athleticism, we mentioned your half marathon. I know you said you're working on something else. You've got the beautiful backdrop there, which is in Uganda. You said you're fundraising. It sounds like you're doing a lot of things. You're writing, you've done the production, tell us a little bit more, I guess, color in what are some of the other things you're working on and in your time, because it sounds like you're not just sitting there writing and running a business, right? You're making time for things perhaps that you value as well in other areas of your life.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like a lot of us. I'm still trying to improve my knowledge and things. I'm studying at Johns Hopkins for my master's degree now in interdisciplinary studies, for a book, probably a more philosophical book. I work with an organization called the Paper Fig Foundation. Thank you for mentioning it. At paperfig.org is the website if you'd like to go there and donate.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, sure. I'm embarking September 1st. I will be leaving Battery Park in Lower Manhattan on a 560-mile bike ride to Niagara Falls.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Raise funds for the organization. We're basically in women's empowerment since its inception. We've helped thousands of people with medical care, life-saving medical care, and trained hundreds of young women in skills training, fashion and the arts, and just to help them get raise their level of opportunity for making money to help support themselves and their families. And it's a project that's near and dear to me. I feel like the more a society improves, the more we educate and empower women. And in that part of the world, as far as that is concerned, that particular element, they lag behind by a century or more. And so to me, it feels vital for the future. So I really love it. I love working with it. I love the challenge that I'm able to, compel myself to finish a bike ride of this length. I think would be really neat. I've run marathons before and that sort of thing. And that's its own kind of challenge. But this is days and days of long rides. So I'm really loving it. I think that we have a good team there, and it's really a worthy cause. So that's kind of outside of, the podcast coming up and some of the, things I want to do in terms of getting out into the world now that it seems like the pandemic, hopefully, is going to start to subside. It's good.
Amazing. And where can we find you online then? So if we want to read more about what you're doing, do you have a name for the podcast yet, by the way? I'd love to hear it. And obviously I'll link to the charity, to your books, to anything else that you have to offer for us.
Sure. The name of the podcast is going to be Bang Goes the Universe.
Nice.
It is one of the chapters in my latest book, Hubble, Humason, and the Big Bang, the race to uncover the expanding universe. It's out on Springer. You can buy it on Amazon, as you can my previous book, The Mule Skinner and the Stars, which is about one of the stars of the second book, Milton Humason. You can find me online at ronvoller.com, RONVOLLER.com. It'll be in the bio, I know. And all of links to my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter accounts are all there, including blurbs on the book and some of the people that I work with in the around the world.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad I came across you very fortuitously in the online space. We share a lot of passions and you've become my new inspiration. So thank you. And I'm sure you'll be inspiring to our listeners as well. So thanks so much, Ron. Best of luck with the podcast launch and with your research, with your book, with your bike ride. And I look forward to staying connected and hearing more. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it.
If you'd like to create your own transition story and escape the 9-to-5 to work for yourself, then come and join us over in the Business Incubator. This is a comprehensive online program and community designed to give you the roadmap that you need to help you figure out what you really want to do, come up with a workable plan, and take the right steps to achieve it. Read more and join us over on onestepoutside.com/9-to-5. That's onestepoutside.com/9-to-5.